Robert Craig, just an old man reading from his Bible. I'm the old man, of course, and this is the Bible, the Holy Bible, only one I use, King James Version. I thought this evening would be a good opportunity to go a little bit further on these travels of Paul, and I think you're going to find that this will help later on in making sense of some of those uh, contextual things that are in the letter, the different church letters. So we had come to Acts chapter 22. Paul made a speech to the crowd after the Romans had taken him into custody. And they've got him in the midst of the crowd now, but he's still in the custody of the Roman soldiers. And he's talking about how the Lord told him to get out of Jerusalem. Now, the context of that was he'd gone into Damascus, got his sight back, and as we saw in Galatians, I think it was chapter 1, he said he didn't come directly back to Jerusalem. Yeah, here we go. He's talking about how it was on the road to Damascus when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace to this. And this is part of his account of how he received that gospel he preaches. And called me by his grace to reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the heathen. Now that's something that the 12 apostles at that point had not really it hadn't even entered their mind. Immediately I conferred not with flesh and blood, neither went I up to Jerusalem. Well, as you read Acts 9, you'd get the idea that he might have come immediately back. But he says here in verse 17, Galatians 1, but I went into Arabia and returned again unto Damascus. Then after 3 years I went up to Jerusalem. Okay, so he's talking to this crowd here about his conversion on the road to Damascus. It came to pass when I was come again to Jerusalem, that has to be after the 3 years, I believe, although there are some differences of interpretation here. There are some people who want to take this and make it some other visit to Jerusalem. But in the plain sense reading of that passage, I believe it indicates that it's in the context of his conversion and those 3 years later. It came to pass when I was come again to Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance, and saw him saying unto me, make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. He's not talking about as he stands there before the crowd on the staircase, and as he's arrested in the temple with those 4 men. He's talking about it's still in the context of Acts 9, I believe. Because when he's arrested by the Romans, he has no note of consent that he can bring to how and when he leaves Jerusalem. And it ends with, and he said unto me, depart, for I will send thee far hence to the Gentiles. Now, there are some people that say, okay, up until the time of this arrest in the temple area, that he's been preaching to Gentiles in Asia. Now it's time for him to go to Rome, so he's going to the far hence Gentiles, which is not what it says. It doesn't say anything about far hence Gentiles. It says, I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. I don't see any justification for rearranging the sentence structure to make it the far hence Gentiles. But that's just me. They say this thing is built on sixth grade grammar, and if you understand that much, you ought to be able to understand what it's saying. And they gave him audience unto this word, and lifted up their voices, and said, Away with such a fellow from the earth. They didn't like that word. They gave him audience to this word, and the word was Gentiles. For it is not fit that he should live. And as they cried out and cast off their clothes, and threw dust into the air, the chief captain commanded that he be brought into the castle, and bade that he should be examined by scourging, that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned? When the centurion heard that, he went and told the chief captain, and said, Take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman. Meaning that he had a citizenship and was entitled to a certain due process of law. Then the chief captain came and said unto him, Tell me, art thou a Roman? And he said, Yea. And the chief captain answered, With a great sum obtained I this freedom. See, the captain was a naturalized citizen, and the process of gaining citizenship was costly, apparently, at least for this man. And Paul said, But I was freeborn. He was born as a citizen, wasn't naturalized. So we see here that Paul really had a dual citizenship. He was a legitimate Jew, but he was also a Roman citizen. Verse 29, Then straightway they departed from him, which should have examined him. And the chief captain also was afraid after that he knew that he was a Roman, because he had bound him on the morrow, because he would have known the certainty wherefore he was accused of the Jews. He loosed him from his bands, and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them. So he's going to allow Paul to be examined by the council under strict Roman supervision. Chapter 23, verse 1. And Paul, earnestly beholding the council, said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded them that stood by to smite him on the mouth. Sounds like somebody said, sounds like maybe he said something like, somebody slap that man. But he was the senior man in the council, the high priest. Verse 3, Then said Paul unto him, God shall smite thee. God shall smite thee, thou whited wall. For sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law? And they that stood by said, Revilest thou God's high priest? Then said Paul, I wist not, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, Thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people. But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other part Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee, for the hope and resurrection of the hope and resurrection of the dead, I'm called in question. When he had so said, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the multitude was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, neither angel nor spirit. But the Pharisees confess both. And there arose a great cry, and the scribes that were of the Pharisees' part arose and strove, saying, We find no evil in this man. But if a spirit or an angel hath spoken to him, let us not fight against God. when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled in pieces of them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the castle. And the night following, the Lord stood by him and said, Be of good cheer, Paul, for as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. And I think that's a good place to stop. So we'll cut off there and we'll pick up with the plot to kill Paul and how they removed him to safety. So he really won't stay in Jerusalem long. For now, though, may the Lord bless this reading of his Holy Scripture. We will continue on in Paul's Odyssey in Roman custody. I hope to see you the next time.